Hi, I'm Dan Welch with Emerging Civil War. I'm the co-chair of the Emerging Civil War Yearly Symposium with fellow co-chair Kevin Pawlak. And Kevin just wrapped up an amazing presentation on some very forgotten and not well-known events in the late fall and early winter of 1862, specifically the Battle of Unison. And one of the things that I wanted to follow up with from Kevin's presentation was how you got into this moment. You know, in 1862, there's a lot going on. We all know you as the Antietam guy in Emerging Civil War. What brings you to these events in the fall of 1862?
A couple of different things. Firstly, when I worked at the Mosby Heritage Area Association, my office was right in the midst of the Unison battlefield. So just, I guess, by natural osmosis of driving along some of those same roads every single day that the armies used, just came to know the places that are talked about in a lot of these after-action reports, came to know the people that are involved, and just continually researching into it, because I thought it was, as you mentioned, something that's not talked about a lot. It's sandwiched between Antietam and Fredericksburg, though I would argue the campaign is a lot more important than it's often given credit for, the Loudon Valley campaign, that is. Probably one of the most well-known events of the American Civil War takes place in the midst of the campaign. George McClellan is removed from command of the Army of the Potomac by Abraham Lincoln, and I had always known that story. I think everybody comes into the Loudon Valley campaign knowing that story, but not realizing the context of what else happens around it and exactly why McClellan is ultimately removed from command.
You know, if you had any doubts about Kevin's presentation, you're like, something I'm not familiar with, you know, I'm comfortable watching those programs about big battles that I know about. I highly recommend watching Kevin's program this year, because he's really highlighting an important part of the American Civil War that we often forget about, and it's those in-between moments. You know, we often study the Civil War in these vacuums. You know, Gettysburg is July 1, 2, and 3. We really don't get into what happened before or what happened after. There seems to be all these dead spaces that have yet to be fleshed out in the larger narrative of the American Civil War. So, you know, you had the opportunity to work and operate in the area that the Loudon Valley campaign happens on. But for folks that want to learn a little bit more about this moment after hearing your presentation, because I know when we got to the end of it, I said, well, I got a whole list of books now that I'm going to have to order, because I know nothing about these important moments. And Kevin very much persuaded the audience that the importance of this campaign, and you need to understand what happens between September 17th and December 11th, 1862. So what resources out there can folks dig into after watching your topic?
Yeah, well, fortunately for Civil War historians, if you're into books and your bookshelves are groaning under the weight of hundreds of books, there's not many to add for the Loudon Valley campaign. Unfortunately, there's a little bit of coverage in Volume 2 of Douglas Southwell Freeman's Lee's Lieutenants. Ethan Rayfuse's McClellan's War has an excellent chapter on it. There's a great copy from 1999, I believe, of Blue and Gray magazine that traces it. My co-author and I, Rob Orison, with To Hazard All, cover it in a chapter as well, but it's really never received the treatment that it should, just in bits and pieces of it. So hopefully someday it will ultimately get that treatment.
You know, and it has a lot of, many of the famous actors, if you will, of the war effort that we become so familiar with as we, you know, talk about Antietam or Fredericksburg in the Eastern Theater in the fall of 1862. And as you watch Kevin's presentation, you're going to hear a lot of stories by a lot of these folks. You know, what was one of the moments that really stood out to you, or one of the actors or characters from the Loudon Valley campaign that really stood out to you as you were preparing this presentation?
Yeah, I think if I can take the word actor, I guess, and expand on it a little bit, I would say really the Federal Cavalry. I think we often look at either the Battle of Kelly's Ford in March of '63, or even all the way up until Brandy Station at the onset of the Gettysburg campaign as sort of the onset, or the coming out party, if you will, of the Federal Cavalry. I think there's an argument to be made that the Federal Cavalry gets the best of the Confederate Cavalry in the Eastern Theater on almost every battlefield that it meets it on. You see Jeb Stuart riding around the Union Army along the Chickahominy in June of 1862. He does it again prior to the Loudon Valley campaign in October of '62. But every single time there's brigade-size Confederate cavalry against a brigade of Union cavalry, especially in the Loudon Valley campaign. It really seems that the Union cavalry shows its mettle and shows that there is a lot of potential there, and is really a precursor to what we know as the Union cavalry, what it will become later on in the Civil War.
Well, Kevin's presentation is absolutely fantastic. I highly encourage you to watch it from start to finish and again, since it will have a home on YouTube in the coming weeks and months. Kevin has really highlighted, as I mentioned earlier, an important fact that particularly in the fall of 1862, after the Battle of Shepherdstown at the end of the Maryland campaign and before Ambrose Burnside starts moving towards Fredericksburg, that there is some really important things going on in the Loudon Valley, and Kevin's presentation really fills a large gap in the historiography on these very important movements and moments in the fall of 1862. So I want to thank Kevin for taking not only the co-reins with me this year of bringing you this virtual symposium, but also highlighting this lesser-known aspect of the war in the East during the American Civil War. So with Emerging Civil War, I'm Dan Welch.
Kevin Pawlak.
And we hope to see you again real soon.